Imagine if you are fully captivated by teapot's appearance and its inner temperament, just as like if you have encountered a confidant or a lover you feel in love from the first sight. At this point, it is really matter that what tea we drink with it. How to choose a right Yixing teapot for the tea you're gonna drink with is a practical topic and many Yixing teapots enthusiasts will face. But for most people, they always ask which teapot is best for this tea. But I think a better question would be, how can I bring out the best flavor of this tea with a right teapot? You might think I'm talking nonsense. But my point is, rather than focus on the teapot, we should focus more on the tea itself, the nature of tea. How can we bring out the ideal expression of this tea with the right teapot? So our goal here today isn't to memorize. For example, this teapot is for black tea and that clay teapot is for green tea. Our goal here is to understand the brewing principle, the logic underneath behind it. Once we grasp that wisdom and once we know what the tea really needs, we could naturally build our own framework to choose a teapot. So, let's begin. To make things easier, I just divided the 6 types of tea into 2 categories: the heat-sensitive tea and heat-loving tea. Heat-sensitive teas include green tea, yellow tea, and white tea, but not aged white tea. Most of these teas are neither non-oxidized or only lightly oxidized. Their brewing goal is simple: avoid overheat to preserve the freshness. Think of these teas like energetic teenagers. If you lock them in a small room with no fresh air, they will soon become dull and lifeless. The same is true for heat-sensitive tea. If too much heat is trapped inside the teapot, the leaves become stewed and stuffy. Bitterness develops more quickly, while the fresh, lively character that makes these teas special begins to disappear. That's why when brewing heat-sensitive teas, we want a teapot that releases heat efficiently and allows the leaves to breathe. And for this reason, I generally recommend the mixed clay, what we call 椴泥, or green clay, what we call 绿泥, which are often appreciated for their breathable character. If you want to know more about these clay's characters, you can check out my former videos. Learn a lower body and a wide belly, giving the leaves enough room to fully expand and allowing the leaves to spread out naturally. A wider mouth could help the heat and steam escape more quickly. The goal isn't to make the tea hotter, it's to keep it fresh. If the aroma of green tea, yellow tea, rose, non-oxidized tea is a delicate fragrance that invites you to slow down and appreciate it, then the aroma of oolong tea is like a flower bursting into full bloom. If we brew a good oolong with freshly boiled water, and within moments the entire room can be filled with its fragrance. And that's why some highly aromatic oolong teas, such like Phoenix Dancong tea, are often described as the perfume of tea. But most of these wonderful aromas are volatile aromatic compounds, which means they need stable heat to keep evaporating and reaching your nose. So the biggest enemy of oolong isn't high temperature, it's losing heat to too quickly. Once the teapot cools down, those aromatic compounds are released less efficiently, and the tea gradually loses the expressive fragrance that makes oolong so special. That's why a good oolong teapot should do two things: maintain the stable heat and retain the aroma. So for such oolong tea, I would recommend the teapot made of Juni clay, due to its high crystallization that perfectly locks aroma inside of the teapot. Although purple clay and red clay also work really well. A relatively small opening mouth helps maintain stable heat and retain the aroma. Also, a gently rounded belly gives tightly rolled oolong leaves enough room to fully expand, allowing every leaf to interact evenly with the water and release its full aromatic potential. In final, a small teapot is ideal. It creates a higher leaf-to-water ratio, making it easier to experience the concentrated essence of oolong tea while encouraging multiple short infusions. That is also the soul of the Gongfu tea. One interesting thing about Yixing is that many local teapot makers they enjoy drink the Yixing black tea, one of the region's specialties. As a result, many traditional Yixing teapots were designed for black tea on purpose. If green tea is all about freshness, oolong tea is about the aroma, then black tea is all about the sweetness, roundness, and smoothness. Of course, aroma still matters, but unlike oolong, the aroma of black tea is woven into the liquor itself. Notes of honey, cocoa, even caramel. It might not be as expressive as oolong tea, but it's softer, rounder, and more comforting. When brewing black tea, the biggest mistake isn't the bitterness, but to produce a cup that is thin and watery. A great black tea should feel rich and satisfying, not like lightly colored water. To achieve that, we want to extract as much sweetness, body, and flavor as possible. Yixing Teapot maintains a consistent brewing temperature, allowing more of the tea's soluble flavor compounds to be extracted evenly while keeping the aroma integrated with the liquor, instead of dissipating too quickly. This is why I like to think of black tea as one of the heat-loving tea, just like oolong. So for choosing a Yixing Teapot for black tea, I would recommend the purple clay or red clay. These are the most common choice, but Juni clay also works well. There's no absolute answer, it's simply a matter of clay preference. But rather than chasing any extreme, I recommend a balanced teapot. A medium height body, medium wall thickness, a medium capacity, and a medium-sized mouth could work without problem. But if you enjoy emphasizing aroma, a slightly smaller mouth can also work well. And this just reminded me of the Confucian idea of the doctrine of the mean, 中庸, the wisdom of finding the right balance. When choosing a teapot for black tea, you don't need to pursue excellence in just one aspect. Instead, choose a teapot with well-balanced characteristics, allowing the tea to develop its natural sweetness and smoothness just in harmony. Here's a common misconception that many people think that black tea is a fully fermented tea. Actually, black tea isn't fermented by any microorganism at all. Its character comes primarily from oxidation, the tea leaves transforming themselves. The warm, sweet, roundness flavor you taste from a good black tea, that's not the work of microbes. That's the flavor of oxidation drawn out from the leaf itself. So, if black tea isn't fully fermented, then what is? That brings us to the final category, the aged tea. Unlike black tea, these teas continue to evolve over time. Some, like dark tea, also known as post-fermented tea, such as ripe pu'er and liu bao tea, develop their character through genuine microbial fermentation. Others, like aged white tea and aged raw pu'er, transform gradually through years of slow aging. But here's why I put them together. Despite their different paths, they share the same brewing objective. When we brew aged tea, we are no longer chasing the fresh, high-flying aromas. What we are after is something deeper. A liquor that's rich, full-bodied, almost velvety experience on the tongue. We are tasting the depth that time has built. The quiet transformation of different microbial compounds within the leaf, slowly rearranging themselves over years into new tastes and depths. And to get that, the brewing vessel needs to do two things: lock in heat, and at the same time allow the tea to exhale in order to filter out some of the unwanted volatile compounds created during fermentation. That's exactly what a Yixing Teapot offers. Excellent heat retention paired with its unique dew porosity is the ideal vessel for aged tea. For choosing an aged tea teapot, I would always recommend the purple clay teapot, because it could bring the best mouthfeel by filtering out those compounds. But other clays also works well. Unless you are clean flake about your teapots, you can avoid the green clay teapot, the 绿泥 teapot. Otherwise, your green clay teapot will be messy by the deep color of aged tea. And for the shape, it's good to look for a fuller, rounder belly. The tea leaves need room to open up and stretch. Also, go for slightly thicker walls. They hold heat better, and heat is basically everything with aged tea. A medium mouth works well for most aged tea, but if you are brewing aged white tea in particular, a slightly wider mouth can make loading those big loose leaves much easier. But now you have probably noticed that these recommended teapots share similar characteristics. That's because the basic logic, the biggest distinction, is whether the tea is heat sensitive or heat loving. That's why at the very beginning I choose to group these 6 types of tea into these 2 broad categories. Because once you understand how the tea responds to heat and how the teapot mediates that, choosing the right one becomes much more intuitive. The remaining differences are mostly subtle refinement and details. But here's my personal opinion. The Yixing Teapot is known as the top of Chinese teaware, passed down through centuries, but I think it's not because of how good the tea that flows from its spout. It's because the artistry soul that lives within the teapot itself. Imagine if you are fully captivated by teapot's appearance and its inner temperament, just as like if you have encountered a confidant or a lover you feel in love from the first sight. At this point, it is really matter that what tea we drink with it.